Happy, happy Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. Happy, happy Halloween, Silver Shamrock. Or, more accurately, one more day to Halloween, 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 Halloween. One more day to Halloween, Silver Shamrock. Okay, I'll stop before I put you off. Yes, indeedy, folks. This is the shitstorm. This is the random spin off. This is Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. And if you can work out why it's called that, you're a better guy, you're a better person than me. So, this is my latest Halloween review, and I'll explain a bit of the background before I go into my thoughts on it and talk a bit more about the movie. So, as far as John Carpenter was concerned, the end of Halloween 2 was the end of the Halloween franchise. Obviously, those two films, the first couple of Halloweens, they work together as a nice little pair, and you get a neat little conclusion at the end of the second part with Loomis sacrificing himself but taking out Michael Myers in the process. So Carpenter was obviously involved in the second film. He co-wrote the script, and as far as he was concerned, that's it for the Halloween franchise, and he walked away. But now, obviously, Halloween 2 made a lot of money, so the studio wanted more, so they decided to go in a different direction, and that's this film, where there is no Michael Myers. And the idea apparently was then you would have an anthology style series where it would be a different horror story each film. And actually, it's not a terrible idea when when you sort of bear in mind that it the two movies we had before this, quite a satisfying little package, and it did do a good job at the end of the second one in, as I said, completing that little arc with Michael Myers and with Loomis and Laurie as well. Obviously, you could still bring Laurie back and do more, but because Carpenter left and said that's the end of Halloween as far as I'm concerned, and Michael Myers has been killed off, they decided to go this route. But the problem was then Halloween 3 Season of the Witch didn't make a lot of money. It was a bit of a bomb, certainly compared to the previous two films. So they decided, well, the problem is there's no Michael Myers, and the fans kind of like Michael Myers. He's an established horror character now. So then, moving forward, they decided to drop the idea of an anthology, and that's why they returned to the character of Michael Myers in Halloween 4, the next sequel, and I'll obviously talk about that on another video. But right now I'm going to deal with Season of the Witch. So the setup of the plot: at the start of the film, we see a man being pursued by this car. He's on the run, and he's attacked by this guy in a business suit, who then is actually hit by a car. He's run over, so the guy escapes, and he runs into the local hospital, and is all frantic, saying, they're after me, the whole town's going crazy, all this sort of stuff. And the local doctor, well, it's the doctor you want on hand in the local practice. It is Tom Atkins, the star of this film, and he's a bit of a ladies' man. He's kind of those sorts of doctors who you sort of dream of in 80s movies, I guess. But then eventually the older guy is killed off anyway. He gets caught up by this other guy, and his face is like just destroyed in his hospital bed. So Tom Atkins decides, I'm getting a bit bored of being a doctor. I mean, I've been doing this gig for a long time, and I want a new profession. I want a new role in life. So in the manner of this sorts of films, he plays detective, folks, because why not? So he meets the daughter of the dead guy. She obviously comes into the hospital, and he starts bonding with her, and they go on this case together, and they start a love affair out of nowhere. And you're already getting the sense of how random and crazy this film is. But that's not the half of it, folks, because it turns out all this is linked to this Silver Shamrock. I was singing the theme, the cheesy but addictive theme at the start of the scene, that the theme that plays throughout the film, and it's all connected to that corporation and these masks that they sell and the manipulation they have on people, the mind control. It's this sort of whole thing about subliminal messages. Yes, in a Halloween movie, subliminal messages is a thing, and there's this whole subplot with Stonehenge and spirituality, and it all gets very, very fuzzy. Sorry, but that's the whole plot. And here we go. I think this is a guilty pleasure. I think it is batshit insane. It is so random and so disconnected from what you think of as the Halloween franchise. That's why it didn't do very well. There's very little logic to it, and it is a bad movie. I'm not going to say it's not a bad movie, but it's kind of so bad it's good. It's kind of so ridiculous and silly and over the top in places. It is actually pretty enjoyable and entertaining in a very silly sort of way. So that's my overall thoughts. So I'm going to talk a bit more about the film and what I like and don't like about it. So I kind of like the way the film opens. You have these very retro video like effects on the screen, and they slowly reveal like the Halloween type pumpkin. So that's a nice little nod to the franchise so far, because each of the previous two films have opened up with that signal. But it is sort of funny, and it is sort of enjoyably retro in moments like that. It looks incredibly outdated now, but I guess that's just the way it is. But it's super cheesy, but I do like the fact that they kept the pumpkin and had it on this computer screen instead, this very 80s computer package. And that sort of makes sense because of the role of technology in the film. Another thing is that we have a very small role for Nancy Loomis, who of course was in the previous two films, and she plays the Tom Atkins character's wife. And she's only in one scene, which is a shame. But yeah, he's a bit of a ladies' man. He's sort of cheating on her with everyone. And Tom Atkins in this movie, he looks like the sort of like actor who would be comfortable in like a Hawaii 5-0, or what's that one with the guy Tom Selleck. That's it. Magnum TA. That's it. Is it? Yeah, I'm pretty Magnum PA. Whatever it is, but he looks like if Tom Selleck didn't get that gig, like Tom Atkins could just swoosh in and you wouldn't really know the difference. So he's almost like this cool but kind of deadpan sort of James Bond type figure. So he's flirting with a nurse in like the hospital, and they have a bit of a flirtation, and she helps him throughout the film with like investigations and stuff. But yeah, it's kind of this kind of stud sort of sexy type doctor who's super slick, and he starts a thing with the girl, as I said, Ellie, and the actress that is actually really bad, but there's some cheesy shit with them, the romance just accelerates as at a ridiculous pace. And one of the hilarious lines is when they've already had sex and they're laying there in bed, and then he chooses that moment to ask her age. Yeah, a bit late then, pal. But anyway, she says something like, "I'm old enough, so," or "Don't you worry about how old." So there you are. But this just random crazy romance that they just shoehorn into this film. Not that I mind a bit of romance in a horror movie, but yeah, you got to do a bit better than this. And obviously, there's this. Besides the fact that he's cheating on his wife again, there's this massive age difference. I mean, he's clearly at least 40, or around that age. At least he might be older, and she at the most is like 22, 23 at a stretch. So yeah, it's a little on the creepy side, folks. But what can you say? He's a bit of a stud. The girls like the moustache, the magic Tom Atkins moustache. And I also like, I think it's his ex-wife, Linda. She's always giving him shit on the phone. And those are actually some of the most entertaining moments in the movie. You can hear her always getting pissed because he keeps letting his family down. He keeps coming up with these excuses why he can't spend time with his kids and why he can't take them trick-or-treating, although he says he would be back to take them trick-or-treating. And then, I love the Linda always giving him shit on the phone, and at one point he says, "Linda, I'm not drunk, try and calm down." But one of the funniest bits with him and Linda on the phone is when he's first going off to investigate this thing, and they're going to stay in a hotel, and he says, "I can't remember the name of the hotel." Yeah, like that's convincing, Tom old boy. And I also love, I mean, the film plays this like it's like a natural sort of thing, but like he's being sincere. But I also love the excuse he comes up with for him and like Ellie to get a hotel room together. So he sort of says, "Well, we don't want to stand out. We want to be undercover in this hotel." That's his whole excuse. And I think the film wants you. I mean, maybe he did mean it sincerely in the film, then it's part of a plan. But even so, boy, does that come across creepy. And she just goes along with it. And I think we find out later that she's into him. But even so, folks, super creepy. Damn that stud. He's just so smooth, god damn it. So there's a lot of things that feel a bit out of place, and I think that's what sort of makes the film so So the music is really random. It's like this sort of like slow moving, slow rumbling sort of synth type thing. And so in the opening scene, it cuts straight into it, and it's like do, sort of like almost like tension building music, and it is so 1980s. And the problem is, it's quite a nice music. It's quite effective, but the problem is, it feels out of place in a Halloween film or in a horror movie. It's the sort of movie you can imagine being played in you can imagine being played in an action type thriller. You could see them piping it into like Beverly Hills Cop or something just to build a bit of tension during a shootout or a chase. And in that sort of movie, it works fine. But in this sort of movie, it just over telegraphs what's about to happen. It is kind of insane and silly. I like the sort of countdown to Halloween. That's quite a nice horror device. You build into the big day and the big plot and the whole grand scheme. So I quite like that as a device. Another nod it has to the Halloween franchise, which is quite a nice meta sort of thing. Is the fact that the film appears on TV several times, and there's a trailer one time. Firstly in the bar, and he says, "I'm not really in the Halloween spirit. Turn that off." But then later on, he is forced to watch it, and that almost seems like a meta sort of thing, where the film is kind of saying, that was that era of the franchise, and that era is over. We're moving into a new era. I mean, maybe I'm giving the makers of this film a bit too much credit, but you can sort of read that in there. Then it's purposely not nodding to those to the original two movies. But yeah, this is the tone of this movie for essentially a horror movie is really strange. It has this like mystery element. It very B movie. It feels very much like a case of the week, which again, if they intended it to be an anthology, sort of makes sense. But yeah, it does feel like one of the early sort of X-Files episode before that show really got going, and a bit like a Twilight episode or Twilight Zone. Sorry, Twilight, very different stuff, but yeah, very different, very mismatch. But there's some entertaining dialogue. The kills aren't that great, but there are some are better than others. I quite enjoy the old man having his face ripped in the hospital beds, and I quite like some of the practical effects. I think save it. They look pretty cool. I like the sort of the almost laser beams going into the face, and I enjoy just the kind of ugliness of the bugs coming from the eyes and the faces. So you have like the woman in a motel room with her remote, and she's being like obviously hypnotized by the signal. And I love how her eyes almost bulge out. It looks like something out of a comic book or cartoon, but it's really good practical effect work. It's quite nice. I quite enjoy it. And we see these bugs coming out, and that's another such a bizarre sort of turn of events. There's a scene late in the film, which I'll talk more about in a minute, but where like this family are cooped up and they're watching like this test screening, and they've been coerced in by this evil corporation, and that happens to the son, and he's got like the silver shamrock mask on that they've been selling, and he ends up just in front of the TV, and essentially his head being fried, and then bugs like spilling out of the mask. So that's like how they put them in, and bugs, snakes, everything. They just attack this family. It's kind of insane, but it's a really fun kill actually. And so you can sort of see themes in this film. You can see like almost, because you have like these smartly dressed businessmen who go around killing people, and so it's all, and the whole silver shamrock and the masks and stuff. Yeah, it's almost like this kind of critique of capitalism and the evils of capitalism, and almost the way it sort of corrupts something like Halloween, which in theory is supposed to be a really like spirited, fun community sort of festival. And so you can sort of see stuff in that, and I mean, again, this is me reading too much into it, but just the fact then you have the previously lauded Carpenter Halloween films, and then you have almost this kind of in comparison abomination, almost that is kind of ripping out the spirit of those original films if you choose to read it like this. But you could just see it as a fun sort of standalone, and then an experiment that didn't work. But actually, one of the highlights of the film is that it's got the actor who played Andrew from Twin Peaks, and he's ultimately the villain of this film. He's the evil corporation owner, and he's actually brilliant. He's like this sort of sinister, like slippery Willy Wonka type mad, like sleazy sort of business owner, this mad sort of scientist. And the scene I was talking about where they get the family into the viewing room and they obviously end up, you know, warping their minds and killing them. That is almost, it reminded me a bit of a James Bond type film where you always have these like crazy villains and their sort of madcapping like schemes to take over the world. It's almost like when they have Bond, they've captured Bond and they show him an example of their insane mad genius world dominating plan. It's almost like that sort of thing. And his facial reactions, the way he's just so cold and malevolent, it's just brilliant. I mean, they got that casting down to a T. He has some real fun with it. He's got the right sort of glee in his sort of voice, and he's really cold and distant, but plays it up a little bit as well. So I really enjoyed his performance. He was very, very good. And actually, I quite like the twist at the end. There's a twist with Ellie near the end of the film where they've both been captured, and she's obviously, the Tom Atkins character finally escapes and turns the tables, and he gets to Ellie and they escape, but it turns out she's a robot, and then she attacks him, and that's a really entertaining scene. They're in a car and she just gets him to crash the car and then tries to kill him, and he fights back and her head goes flying out of the car, and we see her like in robotic form. She's a robot and she keeps coming after him. It's a great little scene, actually. My only question is, was she always a robot, or is that something they did to her when they had her? I mean, if she was almost a robot, that is stretching credibility, because it's like, well, if this was all part of their plan and they wanted to, get close to the Doctor and ultimately, like, well, whatever the plan was. I mean, yeah, it's really going to insane lengths if she was a robot all along. But maybe that gives the twist a bit more oomph. But yeah, it's kind of, it's really, but hey, this is Halloween season of The Witch. I mean, if it can't stretch credibility, what else can you do? But my question is, why didn't she strike sooner if she was, and why would they capture? Anyway, I'm getting in knots here over this, but I did kind of like the twist. It was a nice reveal at the end with Ellie, and gave us something else to do, gave us something proper to do. And Atkins at the end just goes for the Oscar because he finally obviously escapes. He goes to the local TV, like where it's just he goes to the nearest phone he can find, because it's Halloween night and they're obviously transmitting all these messages across America, and he just rings up the studio and says, you've got to shut it down, just shut it down. And they interrupt one broadcast and then they flick channels, and these kids conveniently come along and are being like transfixed by the whole thing. I'm hoping I'm doing this crazy film justice, folks. But anyway, it's and then he gets them to turn another one. They turn and then there's a third one, and they keep. But yeah, bear in mind this is going out all over America in theory. So yeah, I'm not sure. But anyway, I mean, I'm sure they could turn the whole thing off. I mean, if he's supposedly speaking to the studio, which I'm not sure how he got through. But anyway, yeah, it's kind of a funny little ending where he's just screaming down the phone, turn it off, turn it off. stop the signal, or whatever the line is. And it's kind of this where they're really like ramming home kind of the message of the film. And it leaves it on that purposely, kind of, I almost said poignant. I'm not sure that's the right word for Season of the Witch, but yeah, that dramatic sort of cliffhanger where it's like, well, did he stop the signal in time, or is it too late? Have they corrupted us all? And that's where you can read the wider capitalist sort of theme. But that's Season of the Witch. I think I've covered it in quite good detail and had a bit of a blast. And the funny thing is, once you hear that theme, you'll be sucked in. They'll have you in the palm of their evil corporate hands. But hey, it's a fun little theme, and it's a bonkers fun little film. It is a bad film. I think it drags a little bit, and I'm not going to pretend it's a good film, but there's some nice little touches. I like, the reference into the other two films, the original Halloweens. There's some funny lines. There's some decent kills. It's very up and down, but it is kind of a guilty pleasure. So you can enjoy it as a standalone, and I mean, I can see both sides of this. I can see how you can't really have Halloween without Michael Myers. And in some ways, obviously, I'll get onto my thoughts on the fourth film, and I'll probably cover that soon, probably in the next month. But you can kind of see how he is the staple of the genre, and they still did some good stuff with him later on. But also, maybe you could say, yeah, but those original two films, really, they are the perfect arc for him, for that story, and the perfect conclusion. But whatever. I mean, I think this idea for an anthology, moving away from that, was decent. It's just this movie just didn't work for a lot of people and didn't do very well. And who's to say which way it would have gone if they'd continued down this road? But I think for many people, probably they're pleased that Michael Myers was brought back, and I'd say the same, actually. But there you have it. That's Season of the Witch, Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, and we are getting ridiculously close to Halloween 2019. And I just can't wait. I have a few more reviews to do, but I'll keep going and probably get to 31, even though I won't do it within the month. But thank you very much for listening. Let me know your thoughts on Halloween's 3 Season of Witch in the comments below. Like and subscribe if you feel like it. But just any feedback is always good. And thanks for those who dropped in for my live stream last night, where I did the 4th Nightmare on Elm Street. That was a lot of fun too. I got some new subs, which is always good. But for now, thanks for listening, and I'll see you guys again soon. Goodbye.